Make sure that people that are violent go to prison. Make sure that everybody else, you make the complainant as whole as possible and move the case. Because if you're too hard on everything, you get backloaded and then nothing good happens. They said you be nice to everybody because in this building, you never know what that person's going to become, because people that you may not expect much of ultimately become people of power. And you never know when you're going up the ladder, and you never know when you're going down. There's been cases I should have gotten off of.
Why? This is very personal to me. Heath Hyde is the reason I am in Sulphur Springs and the very reason why McKay Law is what it looks today. I am so pleased to have Heath on the show. He is also a legend. He is the #1 criminal attorney in America. That's what I would say. You're the criminal attorney of America, Heath. Can I say that?
I don't know. That credibility may be going down the hill right off the bat.
Okay, well, look, he has over 400 jury trials.
Right.
And you've been doing this for how long?
29 years.
29 years. How many murder trials?
So as far as actual murder trials, probably 120 to 125. I've actually handled either prosecution or defended about 164 murder cases right now, up to now.
That is unheard of.
Yeah, I know I did 87 at the DA's office, and now I've just about gotten even as far as defending another 80-something.
When you say the DA's office, you were a prosecutor, right?
That's correct.
And where are we? Is this Dallas?
Okay, so I was fortunate. I was born and raised here in Sulphur Springs, and went to law school. And the first summer that you're in law school, I used to say the wealthy kids went backpacking in Europe, because the poorer kids like me went home to work because there weren't internships or anything like that. The best decision I ever made was contacting the local district judge here in Hopkins County at the time, who was Lanny Ramsey, and said, "Hey, can I be a clerk or intern?" And he's like, "Well, great." He said, "I don't have a budget. I can't pay you." And I said, "I don't care. I just want to observe and see court." And
how old were you?
I was 23. Yeah. And
still a kid.
Yeah. So I interned for him that summer. He allowed me to go every time they were having court. Anytime they had a meeting, even behind closed doors, he allowed me to attend and sit in. And anytime the lawyers would approach the bench during a trial, I was allowed to go up and listen. And we just kind of hit it off. I didn't know, but Judge Ramsey had been a prosecutor in the Dallas DA's office in the late 60s under Henry Wade. Mr. Wade was a legendary prosecutor in Dallas from 1946 to 86, had prosecuted Jack Ruby and dealt with the Lee Harvey Oswald, and just was well known. And that office had a great reputation.
Wasn't he prosecutor of the year in 2004? Henry Wade?
No, the award was named after him.
Oh, the award was named after him.
Yeah, it was the Henry Wade Prosecutor of the Year. So
wow.
Judge Ramsey said, "Hey, you need to, no matter what you want to do as a lawyer, you need to at least work at the DA's office for a little while." And I was like, at that time, I didn't know what type of law I was going to do. I was just trying to get through law school and pass the bar. He took a day off of work and drove me to Dallas and went and introduced me to Judge Vance, who was the elected DA of Dallas, who he knew. And Judge Ramsey had maintained his relationships in Dallas by being a visiting judge there in the summers, and because he had worked there. And as a result of that, I ended up getting a paid internship at the DA's office. So my whole second year of law school, I was paid for 20 hours a week of work that exposed me to the office and exposed me to people. And at the end of that, they offered me a job. So I was fortunate that my whole last year of law school, I already had a job once I passed the bar.
Prosecuting cases. For the Dallas DA?
For the Dallas DA. Well, at some point, Judge Vance called me in and said, "Hey, we're giving you a job when you pass the bar. You will need to stay in contact, but we can't pay. We lost our money for this paid intern position." I said, "That's fine." I said, "But I need the money. That's my spending money." He said, "That's fine. I understand. But like I said, we want you to work here." And so I called Judge Ramsey because I knew he had said he had a friend that had been an old trial partner of his at the DA's office that knew everybody, and that he'd probably know somebody that needed somebody. And that guy's name was Jim Roth. And at that point, I really didn't know, I knew what the DA's office was, but I really didn't understand what the United States Attorney was and things like that. I'm still learning. Jim Rolfe had been Judge Ramsey's trial partner at the DA's office in the 60s, and they had maintained friendship for, 25 years. And he called me back and said, hey, Jim wants to, he said, he'll use you. You just go to work for him. Here's his number. So I called him and he says, he was gone. And they said, no, you're going to work here. So the first 2 weeks I worked for him, I never had even met him yet. He was going out of town on a trip. What ends up, we met, and he was the former United States Attorney that had been appointed by President Reagan to be in charge of the Northern District, which extended from Dallas, Fort Worth, all the way to Wichita Falls, Amarillo.
Northern District Federal Court.
Yes. And that's one of the more exclusive positions in the law because there's only a certain number of U.S. attorneys and they have to be appointed by the president. Well, I went to work for him, and at that time, Dallas was predominantly a Republican county. He was one of the first Republicans to really ascend when it was switching in the early 80s from Democrat to Reagan Republicans. So he was a big deal in that circle. And he just took me in, and just like Judge Ramsey, he let me go to every meeting that he had. And he was one of the premier federal criminal defense lawyers in the United States. And I was right there in the middle of it. They were involved in the Michael Irvin trial in 1995. That was a big deal. I was there in that, got exposed to that. And as I like to tell people, being a dairy farmer kid from Sulphur Springs, going to work for Jim Rolfe, because I didn't know anybody in the Dallas legal community except who I'd met at the DA's office as an intern. Going to work for Rolfe was like an immigrant moving to the United States, and the only person he knew was the president.
Wow.
That's the best way I would clarify.
Working for a legend.
Yeah. He took me under his wing, and even when I went to work at the DA's office, I would go meet him after work for drinks or whatever, and that went on a weekly situation from 1994 until he passed away in 2021.
Were you commuting, or did you live in Dallas?
I lived over there. I lived over there. The whole time I was a prosecutor, I was living over there. I lived over there during law school, so so I was living there, and I worked for him that year. But he wanted me to go to work at the DA's office too. And there were two other lawyers with him, Kevin Clancy, who was kind of a legendary Dallas criminal defense lawyer, and Jay Ethington was his other officer who had been a longtime assistant U.S. attorney that had a really great private practice, and at one time had the most not guilties in federal court of anybody for like a 5 or 6 year window there. They were just great lawyers, and they took me in like I was their own and just kind of showed me the ropes. And then as passed the bar and Judge Vance called and said we had you a spot, and December the 5th of 96, I started to work at the DA's office. And I can remember the day before leaving Rolfe's office, he and Jay brought me in the office. And like I said, I maintained my relationship with them the next years. But they called me and they said, listen, if you're going to be successful as a prosecutor, you need to remember a couple of things. And I used this in teaching prosecutors as I stayed there, because everything they said ended up being exactly right. They said to work hard. They said to try cases. But they said to make sure that you move cases. They can't sit. Make sure that people that are violent go to prison. Make sure that everybody else, you make the complainant as whole as possible and move the case. Because if you're too hard on everything, you get backloaded and then nothing good happens. And they also told me, they said, you be nice to everybody down there. And by nature, I've been raised to be nice to everybody, and it's mannerly. But they said, you be nice to everybody, because in this building, two things. You never know what that person's going to become, because people that you may not expect much of ultimately become people of power. And you never know when you're going up the ladder, and you never know when you're going down. Everything about that has been exactly right. And I was fortunate to get that advice leading into the DA's office. And I was fortunate to get to know Judge Vance, who was the DA at the time. He had been a district judge and a Court of Appeals judge, and came back and had a lot of wisdom. And just from there, I had investigators that took interest in me. I got to be friends with supervisors there and became good friends with Toby Shook, who's one of the greatest prosecutors of all time. And was fortunate that I was always around the very best lawyers. And I'm just lucky in that regard. And that, I would say, that has been the key to me being able to do what I do, is the fact that, and it goes back, I'll backtrack on one thing. My dad always said the most important quality a person can have is to be coachable. Growing up playing Little League Baseball here, our team won the city championship every year that I played. And he didn't necessarily pick the kid that was the hardest thrower or the best hitter. He picked boys that he knew he could coach. And he was right about that. They would do what he directed them to do, and we would win. Mm-hmm. And the same thing carried over. I was coachable and listening to the people at the DA's office and Mr. Rolfe and others on this is how you do things. And I was thankful that I was smart enough to listen to what they said and try to pattern what they did as far as how I handle cases and what I did. So I was just lucky. Judge Ramsey, without him, I have no idea where my career would be, but it would not have been what it was with meeting me, getting me on at the DA's office and with Rolfe. So I've just been real fortunate.
Did you see other people, other colleagues that didn't have that advice, and how it bit them, and how they struggled for whatever reason?
Well, I mean, if you're not friendly to everybody, mm-hmm. and that person becomes a judge, then obviously you're going to have problems in that court. Mm-hmm. You're going to have sometimes something come up, and you had a potential client that you would lose because that person, somehow blocked it. There's just lots of different things that come from that. And I understood. And Mr. Rolfe, in order to get to the position that he was in, was a consummate politician to the extent that he knew how to work a room better than anybody I knew. And I tried to learn from him and how he did that. And he had this unique quality that he was nice to everybody, but everybody, when he passed away, if you went and interviewed everybody that was leaving that church, they'd have said, he was my best friend. And I've never seen anybody that could make everyone think that he was their best friend. And that's just what I was exposed to. And it's worked for me because when I was a prosecutor, there were lawyers that weren't as successful. There were guys that really didn't have offices, that would kind of live off court appointments. And I called them kind of cafeteria lawyers, that they didn't really have an office. They would go to the cafeteria and drink coffee and go up and try to get a case or whatever. And I tried to treat those guys the exact same as the guys that were considered the very best. And I can tell you that has made a difference in a lot of different ways, as far as my career, as far as how people have treated me. And then some of those people ended up becoming judges. I know some lawyers that had worked for other lawyers, and some people, prosecutors, discarded them, and I felt like kind of talked down to them. And one of those ladies became a judge, and they don't understand why she treats them badly. It's because they treated her like a dog,
and they don't forget.
And mm-hmm. and I've never had that issue. And Judge Ramsey was a good politician. He was liked. It was just fortunate. I just was around people that knew how you're supposed to interact, and that carries over into how I interacted as a prosecutor with defense lawyers, how I conducted my business. And when I ultimately left the DA's office, those guys all sent me business because they knew I would handle my business. They knew how I would handle my business. And a lot of times they wanted me to help them on stuff, and it's because of how I knew how to interact with them. And it all boils down back to Rolfe as far as how to handle that.
Well, I like to call you Cool Hand Luke because you are the most smooth, calm, and collected attorney, no matter how high the stakes are. And very few can achieve that, and with the pressure of the courtroom and the pressure of the stakes that you have. I mean, this is not money. We're talking about people's lives. Right. And have you always been this way? Is this just your countenance, or has this been developed over the years? Because you know what I'm talking about.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. That's very nice. I don't know. It was the training that we got at that time was so good at the DA's office. We had supervisors that would have classes to show us how to be trial lawyers. And then Toby Shook and other people that were at the office, they would bring in defense lawyers who'd been prosecutors. He would tell you how to try cases. And I didn't plan on being a lawyer growing up. So I had not, done mock trial in college or public speaking or anything like that. But I just figured out real quick that jurors believe you if you are telling the truth. And if you're presenting things in a way that they understand it. So I didn't lose my accent in Dallas. I had to still East Texas accent. And I tried to talk to people on a jury just like I would if they worked at the cattle auction barn or they were a plumber or school teacher, whatever it may be. I tried to make sure everybody understood what I was trying to relay to them.
Yeah, you do make things so simple.
But back then, even the judges were in competitions to see how many jury trials they could do a year in misdemeanor court. So misdemeanors are your DWIs, simple assaults, thefts, unlawfully carrying a weapon, things of that nature. Well, some of those courts I were in would try 4 jury trials a week. We'd pick a jury on Monday and present evidence, and they would might finish the case completely in a day. If they came back the next morning, they would be deliberating. We'd pick another jury, and then we'd start evidence, and we did that for 4 days. So you'd do 4 jury trials, and then on Fridays was called TBC day, and normally that was cases that we either had a problem on the case or the people just wanted to trial before the judge, and there might be 20 cases set. So besides you doing your trial, you'd have 80 cases set, and you'd be negotiating. You might be negotiating with 10 lawyers at one time on a case to work out that morning while the jury's out in the hall. So one lawyer would go pick the jury, and then you would have your officer and you'd interview your witness for the first time while the jury is getting picked.
Wow.
So there was a lot. There was not a lot of
trial
prep.
by fire.
You literally were trying cases.
The moment's notice.
That's right. And you just relied upon the fact that the officer had gotten anybody that he needed. Your investigator got anybody that needed to be there. So, you might talk to your witness 15 or 20 minutes before. I mean, there were some cases where you'd look ahead and say, hey, you need to pay more attention to this, or it's a bigger case or whatever. But 2 things about that. The fact of being able to negotiate multiple cases and being able in my mind to keep up with, I've done this case with you and you've got these facts and I'm going to offer you this. And then to do that with 4 other people at the same time, for whatever reason, I was able to keep that together in my mind, and I could negotiate multiple cases at once. And that's not anything that you're trained with. For whatever reason, I was able to remember the back of baseball cards growing up. I didn't try, but I could remember that same thing kind of happened with cases. I could compartmentalize seeing a case, negotiating. But once I started trying it, for whatever reason, I was never nervous in court.
I was about to ask you, even your first trial. Your first trial?
I do remember my first trial. It was a DWI, and I actually saw the lawyer today that I tried the case against, and he said, "I've just been thinking about you." He's older now, and I remember that trial. And it's weird. I remember a lot of my trials. If you gave me the name and kind of the facts, I would remember probably all 400.
Well, I've never seen you nervous. So were you nervous that first trial?
Well, when you first started, I had a book to see when to make an objection and do things. But as time went on, the one thing about trials is that the unexpected is going to happen in nearly every one. And in those cases that we were trying, we would have to change at the drop of a hat because you didn't get the prep. So you had to if something happened in the trial that was different than your report, you just had to adjust to it. And some people can and some people can't. I was able to do that. I was able to adjust.
Under pressure.
I was able to adjust and I was able to be, and trials are very tiring. And a lot of people don't understand that because you're asking your witness a question as a prosecutor. The defense doesn't have to turn over who their witnesses are.
What do you mean by that? You have no idea who they're going to call?
No, they don't have to. In criminal law, the defense doesn't have to turn over their witnesses unless it's an expert. There's no depositions. So you're going to cross-examine the defense witnesses by what they say in court in front of you.
Do they have a witness list?
No,
there's no witness list.
There's no witness list. You don't know who they are until they swing the door and they say their name, and then we would hand that name to an investigator who would go run to see if they had a criminal record.
So you would just suspect who they may call based on what you may know about the case.
Not necessarily. I mean, because you don't know if they had a friend with them at the bar, or you don't know if there was somebody.
There's no deposition.
There's no deposition. So I had never.
Wow.
For my first 14 years as a lawyer, I'd never cross-examined anybody with a deposition before. It was just by what they said.
So when someone's lying, I guess.
You had to learn how to do that, and I learned different tricks and picked up. But for whatever reason, once I knew, and also somebody told me some good advice. When you're trying a case, there's a reason. TV always made news 30 minutes. Well, they just didn't come up with that. They could have said, okay, news should be an hour, or news should be 45 minutes. I'm sure they studied that. All the national TV would not, they studied everything that they were going to do. Well, 30 minutes is about all people's attention span really, can listen. I always viewed it as, well, juries are not going to listen that long. I'm going to get my licks in fast and hard. And I just always tried cases fast. And also Judge Vance, that had been the DA and been that judge. One time I was with him at a dinner by myself, kinda, and he told me, he said, as a judge, I saw more prosecutors mess up their case or lose because of redirect. He said, you should never redirect a witness unless you just absolutely miss something critical to your case. Well, once I did that, I'd done about probably 8 or 10 jury trials at that point. Once he told me that, I never redirected a witness again. And it made a huge difference.
Wow.
It caught defense lawyers off guard, and still to this day, it does a lot as far as even prosecutors, because they think that they need to keep asking questions, but you're just, as a prosecutor, if you ask a redirect, you're going to give the defense lawyer the opportunity to come back and ask something they forgot to ask the first time. And so as a result of that, I did my cases fast, and it really worked for me. And for whatever reason, when I played sports growing up, I was kind of the relief pitcher in baseball. Stressful situations didn't bother me. And I guess that kind of carried on, that once I got my feet under me about trials and how they were supposed to go, and I did 66 jury trials my first year I was at the DA's office.
Wow.
It was going
in 1 year.
And that was that fast. And it was just, things changed all the time. And for whatever reason, I didn't get rattled with the change. I would just figure out a way to go about it a different way. And I would say that would be one of my strengths, was being able to adjust in a trial. But I never went into a trial also with my mind of one way and this is how I'm going to prove it either. I've always went in with different avenues, waiting to see how it played out. And another reason for that is that for 6 years at the DA's office, I was deputy chief over the domestic violence division. And Dallas was one of the first 5 DA's offices in the United States that devoted to prosecuting domestic violence. I know Illinois, Chicago, San Diego. I know Dallas, I think, was the first one in Texas. Houston may have been right after. But anyway, at that time, when we first started the division, and when I was in there in 2000, the law allowed us to prosecute cases without the victim. And if the police arrived and a lady was under duress and hurt and was given an excited utterance of what happened, we could call the police officer to testify if we proved up that she was excited of what she said happened at the scene, because they considered that to be, credible testimony if they were saying it while they were upset. Well, we did that for a while, and there were some big cases. I mean, women who had clothing irons removed most of the skin off their leg or whatever, had been beat badly, and they would come testify for him. I had to start doing all these cases where I didn't know what my victim was going to say. If I put her on, I didn't know if she was going to change on me, if she'd been threatened. I didn't know if she was going to show up and testify for him. I knew there was a good chance of it if she didn't cooperate with me before. But as a result of that, it also prepared me to be open of how to try the case because I didn't know for sure what was going to happen. And as a result of that, I never gave opening statements.
You never gave opening statements?
I never gave opening statements in my cases because
you didn't know where it was going to go.
I always felt like that if I offered an opening statement and didn't come through with exactly what I said,
right,
it was going to hurt more.
That makes sense.
So since I didn't know for sure, and as a routine, Dallas really didn't, the prosecutors didn't, it was not in vogue to do opening statements unless it was a really, really big case. Mm-hmm. But I didn't because I didn't know for sure what my victim was going to say. I didn't know for sure if she was going to show up. Even if she thought she was going to show up, she could not show back up the next day. Mm-hmm. So I didn't give opening statements. And I just felt like if I give a good enough one at closing, they'll make up for it. So as a result, I think of that, of being in that division, not knowing what my witnesses were going to say, it also trained me to be, I never got to where I would call more than 2 witnesses about the same issue. I wouldn't call 3 witnesses. I felt like in one of those prosecutors had been there forever said, if they don't believe your first 2 witnesses about something, they're not going to believe the third one. I always felt like prosecutors that would call all these witnesses were just opening up ways for somebody to put a kink into their case. And I didn't do that either. So as a result, I always tried cases fast, and it just worked for me. I think all those things together kept me to where I never felt pressured in trial. I always felt like I was going to be able to argue enough in the end to fix anything. And I always felt like that I was just going to figure out a way. And so as a result, even to this day, I'm less stressed in a trial than really even going and doing a docket.
What do you mean going to do a docket?
Just going and resetting cases, okay. or plea bargaining on a case. I'd be more stressful on that. If I'm in a trial, I don't have any stress at all.
So you were 10 years as a prosecutor?
Yes.
And how did you make the decision to go to defense?
I knew at some point that would happen. I knew I would wanted to work with Mr. Roth in private practice at some point. And the decision just kind of became easy. That there was a transition from Bill Hill had been DA after Judge Vance, and I was fortunate to work for him and had a good relationship with him. And it switched from Republican to Democrat in the 2006 election. And Mr. Watkins won, and I was friends with Craig, and I was offered the opportunity to stay at the DA's office and even in a good position. But at the time was trying to have a child, and we were having to go through in vitro, and county insurance didn't pay for it. I thought, you know what, this is just the time. And I didn't know if there were going to be changes I didn't agree with or whatever, but it didn't matter. I was going to have to make more money because of that. And it naturally worked out, and it evolved in me going and being able to office with Jim, office with Dan Haygood and Knox Fitzpatrick, who were 2 of the best criminal lawyers in Dallas and had been longtime prosecutors, with Toby, with Bill Werski. I would just immediately went in with the best of the best and was able to learn from them. So I just got lucky again. What
was the biggest shift going from prosecution to defense? Just the actual practice, and that you were getting paid by your clients, or was it more in how you approach the justice system? Obviously,
I didn't have to worry about the business aspect of things. So, and a lot of lawyers are good lawyers, but they're not very good businessmen. I got good advice from Rolf on that and others. And he always said, if you're working in your office, you're losing money. And the way my practice has evolved is I'm very seldom ever in an office working.
What do they mean by that?
I don't, because you're out meeting with people, you're working on a case, and it just is how the business cycle, and you get more cases is being out and going to court, and it was right. I can't tell you why, but it just works that way. I've done so many. I'm fortunate I don't have to take as much time to prepare for certain stuff. I'm always prepared, and I'm very seldom ever caught off guard because I've always done high volume from day one as being a lawyer. But I have my office time on the things that have to be done. But it was right. I'm in court every day. somewhere. And most of the time, I'm in multiple places every day. As Mr. Rolfe used to tease, he was the best lawyer. Judge Vance used to say Jim Rolfe was the best lawyer he ever knew from the trunk of his car. Well, I would think that maybe Judge Vance might love for him to be able to say that about me, because that's pretty much how it is. And I mean, really and truly, the Lincoln Lawyer on Netflix is pretty close to how my life really is.
So you have a driver?
Sometimes, not all the time. Some would say I need one all the time.
Yeah,
But
I'd say so.
I don't know if they would tolerate wanting to put up with me that much. So it doesn't work out.
So you're specializing in federal, but you also do state?
I do both. I like federal best.
Can you give us examples of federal crimes?
Okay, so federal crimes would be big drug cases, where cartel drug cases,
Cartel? Did you just say the cartel?
Yes, kilogram cases, drugs that are passing across state lines, bank fraud cases, lots of healthcare fraud stuff in regards to a lot of pharmacy stuff, compound drugs or Medicare issues with billing, how doctors use labs, COVID testing, COVID labs, the PPP loans that were fraudulent. A lot of that stuff is federal. And so I've done a lot of those. And then the other main issue that I've dealt with, I would say, is a specialty that, not by purpose, has ended up being murder cases, because I did a lot. I did 87 at the DA's office. Of those 87, probably 70 were domestic, husband, wife, or kids who killed their parents. And then that's evolved into me doing another 80 in private. So I'm at 164. I've got 4 pending right now throughout Texas. I've had some good success with murder cases. I like doing them. It's kind of like what you see on TV.
It's the highest stakes. It's somebody's life's on the line.
And they're all different. So I'm glad that it evolved that way. Like I said, I didn't leave the DA's office and said, "Oh, I'm going to really focus on these murder cases." It just kind of happened. So I do a lot of that, but I've done cases in 64 different counties in Texas in my 20 years in private practice. So I've done federal cases in Las Vegas, California, Virginia, St. Louis. I like going to court different places. It's fun. I like seeing how other people do things.
What's the big difference between a federal trial and a state trial?
Federal would be, and there's fewer lawyers in federal court than there are state court, because it's more formal.
And you have to be admitted.
You have to be admitted, and you have to do all your talking from a podium in a big courtroom with a judge sitting on a bench. And I think some lawyers are worried about the formality of the rules and the motion practice that goes along with it that doesn't really exist in state court, as far as the things you have to file and do. Mm-hmm. And it was fortunate, again, for me. There was a legendary Dallas lawyer by the name of Bill Alexander. Bill was a prosecutor in Dallas from like 1948 to the mid 60s. And he ultimately worked as an assistant United States attorney when Mr. Rolfe was the United States attorney. And then he would do private practice, but he practiced till he was 92.
So did he ever have time to retire?
He says, you never want to retire as a lawyer, because then all you ever do is give free legal advice. That was what Mr. Alexander said. But I know that's what, 56, 67, 86. Mm-hmm. I mean, he practiced well over 50 years. And when I went into private practice, I told him I was going to start doing federal stuff. And he said, well, that's great. He said, you just get in there and get after it. He said, the only thing federal court is JP court in a tuxedo. Ever since he told me that, I thought, you know what? If he says that, it must be right. And it is. I mean, at first, it's kind of intimidating, but once I've done jury trials, it's the same thing. It's just...
Is it the same amount of jurors?
Same jurors, but you're restricted. In a state court, you can be more theatrical and walk around. There, you can't really leave the podium. But as I've evolved into there, it doesn't bother me to talk the same way to jurors as I did in the other courthouse, or to judges or anything else. And my approach is one to be very directly to the point. I don't rate write great expansive motions or anything. I just kind of get right to the point, just like I've tried cases, and it's worked fine for me. But I like federal court. You don't have to go as much. You interact with the investigative gators more and the agents than you do in state court, which is fine. So I've enjoyed it. It's completely different, and there's not as much competition, to be honest, as far as lawyers wanting to do that. You can charge more. And
and also you have to apply and be admitted to each one.
Right, that's right.
You helped me get into the Western recently.
That's right.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, but it's fun. I'm fortunate because I've never gotten up one day in 29 years and said, I dread going to work today. Never once. I loved it as a prosecutor. I've loved it as a defense lawyer. I'm fortunate that I was able to handle my business enough to do it right and not get into any issues as far as on taxes Mr. Roth lined it all up. Hey, this is how you do it. And there's just been no issues. I've been fortunate on, no big issues with clients and paying. It's just always kind of worked. I don't like that part of it, but it's been fine. And I like doing other things. Everybody likes to go play golf. Everybody likes to go and do things, but I would have never guessed that my job ended up kind of being my hobby. And so getting to see my lawyer friends or getting to go to lunch or going to courts and seeing a lawyer that I haven't seen in a long time in, 200 miles from Dallas that you wouldn't think would be there. I enjoy the interaction with it. And I'm fortunate to have good lawyer friends all over and the connections I've made. And so my enjoyment is the people that I see and the things I do. And, obviously there's clients that you hate.
I was going to say, do you ever lose sleep over cases?
Some, and I never did as a prosecutor, ever did. But at some point, I went through a spell where I really worried about my clients and them making the right decision. I didn't worry about whether I was going to be able to do the right thing or whether I was preparing their defense properly. I was always worried that they're not going to make the right decision. And I got to a point where I was really stressed, and all of a sudden I was like, hold on a second. I can't worry about their decisions. I can show the horse where the water is, but I can't force them to drink out of it. And I just stopped. I quit worrying about that part of it. I don't let it bother me anymore. I still don't. You want them to make the right decision. You want them to succeed, or I want my clients to succeed. But you can't fret over if they're making a bad decision. I've got it going on right now. I've got a client that is making a terrible decision that's going to change the amount of time that he's going to have to spend in prison. And I'm very straightforward with my clients. And I think some people like that, some people don't. Some would say that I guess I would be, if you ask somebody that knew me as a non-lawyer, they would never say I was gruff or firm. But if you ask certain clients, they would say, well, he's gruff and firm. And my other friends that haven't been in that situation, I think, laugh about that. But I always felt like that clients needed to know. I didn't want to be what I call a cheerleader lawyer. There's some lawyers that tell their client everything they think their client wants to hear. And then at the end, when it turns out bad, they pat them on the back and say sorry and walk out the door. And I said, I'm not going to do that. If something's good for us, I tell you it's good for us. If it's bad for us, I tell us it's bad for us. And my client's arms behind their back and say, you're going to do this or you're going to do that. I lay it out. I've done as many as anybody anywhere. I have a good feel for what a jury's going to do. Am I surprised sometimes? Yes. You can't ever guarantee what people are going to do. But I get a good feel for judges for most part. And I tell them, and I think some people don't like the fact of being told, hey, you're going to have to go to prison. We can't win the case. But I don't ever lose sleep over that I misled them or tricked them or anything else. As a result of that, I don't worry about that. I've had a couple of times where I had really hard to deal with clients. And probably one of my bad characteristics is there's been clients I should have gotten rid of.
Well, remember the advice you gave me?
Some of the best cases you ever take are the ones you don't take.
The best cases you ever take is the one you didn't take. That's
right. And that was another Rothism. And that's been right too. But there's been cases I should have gotten off of.
Why?
That just because the stress, there were unique circumstances. Mm-hmm. There were certain faults with them, whether with their personality or other things that were unreasonable, and it just was a continual stress on me that I couldn't change. And that you're going to have clients that will lie and cheat with you, and that's a hard thing to get accustomed to. You want everybody to be fair with you. You want them to talk to you in a way that you can help them. But there's some that are just going to cheat and lie to you. I've got a case where I had a guy that I got his case dismissed, and he filed a grievance on me because I got his case dismissed. I may be unheard of, but I mean, it seemed like every time I've gone out of my way to help somebody or done something for less money than I would normally charge on a case because I felt sorry for them or whatever it may be, it's always backfired because they've always never appreciated that. So there's been a couple years where just whatever reason, I think 2019 was a bad year. There were a lot of real stressful cases. For most part, I mean, it's been okay, but I've learned now that I really look for signs to see. I'm fortunate that I can be a little bit more picky than I was, when I first started. And if I see any red flags,
you can spot them faster.
Yeah, I just don't. I try not to get involved in it. And there's a couple of cases that if people have this case, they're harder to get along with, and I don't try to take those cases. I just try to learn now. I'm 55, and I still like what I'm doing. I don't plan on retiring anytime soon, but I'm not gonna go to a court where a judge is bad and stressful now. I'm not. I can make that decision. There's only a couple that I'm not going to go their court because they're a horse's ass. And there's certain cases that I'm not going to do if I see these signs of them being hard to deal with and can't keep up with. So
people often think that it comes down to the evidence. Purely the evidence is the result. How much would you say it really comes down to negotiation, relationships, courtroom strategy? Beyond just the facts that you're dealing with?
At the end of the day, the facts are the facts. You can't really change them. You can try to make them viewed a different way, but you can't change them. Relationships are important. At the end of the day, a prosecutor is going to do what they think is the right thing to do in the case and protect their complainant. So they're not going to just give a case away. Or, I've never seen that. I've never seen anybody buy off a case when I was a prosecutor or a defense lawyer. Obviously, people that have a lot of money can provide more things to help them than somebody that doesn't. I mean, that's just human nature. But I've never seen, and to be honest, as a prosecutor and defense lawyer, I think I've done over 14,000 cases, the best I can calculate. Only 3 times have I seen the absolutely wrong thing happen. Twice as a defense lawyer, twice as a prosecutor, and once as a defense lawyer, where the absolute wrong thing happened. But that's a pretty good percentage, 3 out of 14,000. I mean, that I could say, man, that is the really wrong thing. That should not have happened. So obviously the relationships matter. I would think that it would be hard to ever really be a successful criminal lawyer if you're not good in trial. And if you don't have skins on the wall to where you've done it. And I think that's one misconception. There's a lot of lawyers that haven't tried very many cases. They may say that they have, but really and truly, skins on the wall, you've argued to 12 people and they went into another room and came back out with an answer. It takes a special guy to do that. I call him a gunslinger. How we were taught of being able to do it at the drop of a hat. I don't think people really research enough about finding out which lawyers will really try cases and are good at it. Because I don't care who you are, if you know that the other side knows how to try a case, and if they don't want to lose, they're going to offer you a better deal than somebody they know can't take a case to trial. And that's just the bare facts.
Right.
But people don't really research, who really tries cases?
You mean your clients don't research?
I think they don't, a lot of times don't research, and they hire people that they think are real trial lawyers that really haven't tried that many cases, especially in federal court, because unless you worked at a DA's office, if you only worked at a U.S. attorney's office, depending on how aggressive you were as far as trying cases, they'll hire lawyers at a big law firm, and they may have somebody that wasn't a U.S. attorney at one time, but they're going to have some associates that they're just not going to have real trial experience. Big firms are great as far as information gathering, but as far as it's very rare to have one that has tried a lot of cases. And I think for federal court and even people in state court, if you can try a case, you're going to get a better deal, because the U.S. attorney or the DA, a lot of them aren't going to want to. So
not all criminal defense lawyers try cases, is what you're saying?
That's right. Mr. Rolfe said one thing, and again, I know I probably mentioned his name 100 times, but he said one thing, and I didn't understand it at first. It's taken me 30 years to get it. But he said that if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Well, when I first heard that, I thought, well, if you're a guy that robs banks, you eventually may get shot by a police officer robbing a bank. Mm-hmm. But that's not what it really means. I mean, it means that, but it means something else too. It means that if you're a guy that deals dope, if you get caught dealing dope in the federal system, if you really want to try to get out of your problem, the way the system is set up, the most important thing that you have is information. And if you have information and you're willing to share it, you can work your way and minimize your sentence a lot. But, you always have this deal about word on the street. I'm not going to be a rat, or I'm not going to testify against anybody. And that's kind of a false deal too, because most federal cases, I always joke, there's two kind of people in federal court: those who cooperated and those that wish they would have, because that's the really only way to really help yourself if the facts are against you. Well, the live by the sword part is, if you got yourself in a bad situation from dealing drugs, from making a bad decision, that's going to require, if you really want to get out of it, you're going to have to do some things you don't want to do, like testify against somebody or give information against people you may even care about. And that's the dying by the sword part, that you have to do things that you don't want to do in order to help yourself. So if you're going to make that decision, and that's the business that you're going to get in, you're going to know that at some point you're going to have to do the other if you want to maintain. So
in civil court, we always say a trial is won or lost after jury selection. Do you think it's the same in criminal court? Like picking your jury is the most important part? Kylie, it's important, but I've never had a jury consultant. I've had to do 400, and I've been pretty successful. The problem is that in a criminal case, even on a murder case, I may only get 1 hour to pick the jury. The prosecutor gets an hour. The judge can talk, and some of them will talk for 5 minutes. Every once in a while, you'll see one that'll talk for 30. But for most part, the prosecution is going to talk for an hour, and then I get an hour. What I've learned about jury selection is that a lot of prosecutors, and when I was a prosecutor, I didn't do this. I'm a terrible IT guy. I'm not good with, and my friends would tell you that. I mean, I go to court still with a legal pad, an Expando file with manila folders with my notes in it. I don't have a computer or anything to court with me. So I have to get somebody now if I'm wanting to present for the exhibits. Used to, I liked being in front of the jury and handing them my exhibits, and I felt like it was important to be close to the jury. In regards to the jury, I only ask personal things, and I don't go over the law. If it's a self-defense case, the prosecution knows that, and they're going to go over that. If they don't go over something I want to know about it, I'm going to ask. But I individually ask questions to jurors. I don't ask group questions. I don't say, anybody on the first row, do you believe that? I say, do you, and I'll change the question up, because a lot of people will not speak if you ask them to raise their hands. And I just focus on the ones that I know are going to be in the strike zone. I don't care what the guy on the back rows that's wanting to talk has to say. And that's worked for me, because I've always been able to find out things that we would have never known had I done the talk about the law. I'm not a believer in talking about the law and trying to get
the jurors to know their case. I'm more wanting to know, have they been on a jury before? Have they ever been the victim of a crime? Have their kids ever been to prison? Personal things on how they would view it. And in federal court, you may only get 10 minutes to pick for voir dire. The judge does it. So obviously it's different than civil because I've only tried a couple of civil trials as far as juries for lawyers, and I picked the jury the same way that I normally have for that, even though I know a lot of civil lawyers want to present their case and try to get a feel for it. But in the trials I've been, that wouldn't work.
So you mentioned 14,000 cases, 400 trials,
right?
But only 3 stand out to where they were glaringly wrong. In
my mind, and reflecting back, yes. 2 as a prosecutor, that the jury absolutely did the wrong thing. And I can't tell you why, except they were both domestic cases. And I think at the end of the day, they just didn't feel sorry for the victim because of things that she did after the fact. And then there was another case with a trial. And, I've done 400 jury trials, but they're still telling how many trials I've done with a judge. I mean, it'd get into.
Oh, those are just jury trials.
Those are just jury. I've done probably 1,000 trials to a judge, or trials before a court. Yeah, I've done probably 1,000 of those. I mean, that's just actually 12 people go make a decision in a room and come out.
So I had a short stint as an intern in the Dallas DA office in a federal court, and I saw a lot of inconsistency with the sentencing. One person gets 5 years, the other, gets off, or, vice versa. Yeah. How do you make peace with that after a career of seeing such a variety?
Well, I think it boils down to the lawyer. I mean, the lawyer knows what to present to that certain judge. That lawyer knows what's important on a certain type of case to present, and preps their client on it. And they know how to prep their client on how to talk and what would be expected of them and what to do, and then also they know how to pretty up their good parts and how to try to hide their bad parts, and that a lot of that comes from the lawyer. And one thing that I've always made sure that I did is I've always been as accurate as I could be, good or bad, when I was a prosecutor, because I didn't. And as a defense lawyer, I haven't been someone where I've come and said to the prosecutor or judge, "Oh, my guy's a good guy and didn't do this. My guy's a good guy." I wanted it to. If I did say this guy's different and a good guy, the judge is going to know. Well, Mr. Hyde's never misled me on something. Or if a prosecutor says he's never misled me on something. I had a judge tell a jury one time that if I told him that it was going to rain, he would bring an umbrella. And that was the highest compliment I could get from that judge, because I just always felt like it was important when you're presenting things to do it where they could rely on you, because if you do that, you're going to get things that others can't, because when you need to, when you have the right things, and that's just very important. And then sometimes people will do things that change their sentence, no matter how much they've worked. So you in your question, you said, does it bother me that somebody that got a 5-year sentence when everybody else in there got nine years? No, because that's what I was supposed to do. I mean, I had a case in the last couple of years where there were some unique circumstances about it. It's a federal case. There were some unique circumstances with the case that could enhance his penalty. And he was a guy that was very hot-tempered and could get mad real easy. And we ended up being in front of a judge that was really hard to deal with. And we couldn't have had a worse judge for what we had. And it was a situation where there was a way I could argue to get some levels off to lower his sentence. And I worked hard, and I had prepped my client about, hey, whatever you do, don't say this, because if you do, everything else that we've done is going to go down the drain. And sure enough, I got the judge to go along with what we wanted, which was rare. And the prosecution said something to the guy, it made the guy mad. And he immediately said to the judge exactly what I had said. No matter what you do, don't say that. And sure enough, the judge, though she had done the things I wanted to help us, when he said that, she raised his sentence back up to where it had been, and we didn't get any benefit from that. And that's just how it is. There's just some people that just
are their own worst enemy.
Yeah, if you make bad decisions, some of them just keep making worse decisions, and some.
Yeah, how do you not get jaded when you have the same client come back over and over?
They just mess up. You can't change it. I mean, and obviously there's some that you've represented, and they kind of get to where you're kind of close with them because you've had to help them through all these trying times, and there can be a friendship there. I try to be an encourager. Every time I've ever had a case in 20 years, I've tried to end our situation by encouraging them, by telling them, you've got a chance to turn this around. You're smart. You can do other things. Don't let this define you. And I did that for a guy 18 years ago that was gotten addicted to methamphetamine, had been a master electrician, got caught up with some guys and just was burning himself out on meth. And I did the same thing about encouraging him that you can do better, you're going to be fine, you can do well. And for 18 years, he has called me every anniversary of saying, I want to thank you. 18 years ago today was the last time I took drugs.
Wow.
He sends me a card, in my office a card, for every holiday for 18 years. And when I say every holiday, New Year's, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Groundhog Day, Flag Day, 4th of July, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, every holiday.
Wow.
And he'll send a text, and it's just weird how he knows. He'll send a text that just says, hey, hang in there today. I know you're working hard for somebody, but don't forget about yourself. And he's done that for 20 years. So there's rewards to it. Mm-hmm. And for most part, everybody's like me or you. They just make a mistake. I've been around some people that were as mean as you could be. I've been around some people that when they're so evil that when I walked in the room, they just sucked the energy out of it. Just kind of like being around a poisonous snake. It's just different. And
so you faced evil.
I have. I have. And
greatest depths.
And but there's others that just needed a little help and boost, and have done well, and that's rewarding. But that's me realizing part of my calling was, whatever reason, this is what I was supposed to do.
You mentioned representing, everyone from murderers to drug dealers, federal crime, white-collar crime,
right,
bank robbers.
Right.
Does it ever bother you representing criminals?
All right, that's a great question. And I didn't think much about it when I left from the DA's office of being the guy in the white hat to doing the other. Obviously, making more money was a benefit of being in private practice versus, working for the government. But I was raised in a East Texas strong religious background where we were in church. If they had church on Sunday morning, we were there. If we had church on Sunday night, we were there. If we had church on Wednesday, we were there. My grandparents, that was just how we were raised. I was doing a case in Las Vegas, with a federal case, actually working with a pharmacy. And I was there with a private investigator and another lawyer I was doing the case with. And it was in a strip center. And next to where we were having our meeting at the pharmacy, we were early. We had to start back the meeting at we were supposed to come back at 1. We go eat lunch or something. We get back and it's like 12:40 or whatever. And we're sitting there in a rent car that's not in my name. And I'm there with these guys and we're just kind of horsing around. And next door to the pharmacy was what I would say would be arts and crafts store, Hobby Lobby, a Hobby Lobby for astrology.
For astrology?
For astrology. So they had an advertising palm readings, $15 for 15 minutes.
In Las Vegas.
In Las Vegas. So my guys were like, it's 12:40. You go get your palm read. You go get your palm read, or go do that or whatever. And I thought, you know what? Car's not my name, so they can't do a license plate, and I'm not from here or whatever. So I go in and I do, and they're all like, they're as excited as I am that I'm going to do this. I don't really know why, but it was funny. So I go in and I give them my $15, and along this wall, they have little booths about this, just like this, a table. You would be there, and then there was just a little curtain that they would kind of just close, but you could still hear what's, going on in the other booths. It didn't go to the ceiling. It was just like little curtains. So I sat down with the lady, and she was tarot cards. I don't know anything about it. And she's doing this, and obviously with what I do, I'm pretty good about reading facial expressions because that's how I cross and everything else. Well, she's doing the cards, and I see her facial expression looks awful. And I said, listen, if my plane's not going to make it back to Dallas, you need to tell me right now. And she said, listen, she said, you're around awful people. She said, you're around people that there's people stealing from you. There's people lying from you. And there's people that hurt people. There's people that are mean. And I said, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. And she just kind of slumped over and said, she said, I'd never had anybody in here before where I'd had this deal before, these cards. And without knowing anything else about me, she said, listen, she said, you were raised around really high moral people. And she said, your spirit is really upset about what you do every day. It's kind of in turmoil because of combating with these evil people. And she went into details that nobody else, there was no way anybody would know. And the point of that story was, I never had really thought about it, that is the exact opposite. All my parents' friends were people from church. Mm-hmm. I had not thought about the fact of being around people that didn't live like that. Mm-hmm. And that my spirit was upset about that. And it made me realize that I couldn't really change at that point what I do, and that maybe that's just what I was supposed to do, and that I think that I could deal with that part of it. But I've viewed it different since then as being more of not getting caught up with it and trying to make sure I kept those things separate, trying to do what I can to help, but not get intertwined with clients and things so much that I allow that to attach to me. Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing that I've learned. And that was, I don't know, maybe 2021 or in the last 5 years, I've worked real hard on trying to be able to help people and what their problem is, but don't get intertwined with it. Don't allow that to adjust who you are because that's what you do.
Right.
And that may not make sense, but that was the one thing I've really learned that's made a difference, because it could be real easy to slip into that.
Well, I think it takes a special person and a special personality to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Because when I was in Chicago, I was an intern at the state's attorney's office, and I stared at a death row wall. And it was young boys, most of them, they were all male in gangs that were on death row. And I didn't have the stomach for it. Yeah. I just, I couldn't handle the fact that, you
can't, so
you can't change.
That's right.
Like you said at the beginning, you can't change the facts.
Yeah. So I think you had, I know you'd said we're needing to wrap up, and I'd love to come back someday. But I think you had a couple of questions about cartel, because I talked about that I've represented quite a few people that are cartel. And I think I have a different view of it than maybe some. On how it works? The operation itself, or who the people are? Yeah, I think so. So obviously it's awful for drugs to be brought into this country. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it is a bad thing. And obviously it's ruining lives, and it's something that's got to be addressed and prosecuted as it should be. But the one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that the cartel, the actual ones running it are tough people, mean people, but they force a lot of people to participate that don't want to participate. Okay? So you've got people that are truck drivers in Mexico that have never been in trouble. I had a case of a guy in Colombia that was a fisherman that lived in the jungle in Colombia that just had a little boat that he would fish and sell fish. They lived in a what I would consider a tent and with a generator and an hour from town. But the cartel decided they needed his boat. And they came to him and said, listen, you've got to load this boat up with cocaine. It was about 1,000 kilos. and we're going to put a phone on here that's got a GPS on it, and you've got to go 4 miles out into the ocean and drop this in the water for the boat to come by and get it. And he said, if you don't do that, when you get back tonight, there's not going to be a camp, and you won't see anybody that used to be at the camp again. He goes out 4 miles in a boat that I would not cross Lake Sulphur Springs in. And the point being is he got arrested. The Coast Guard arrested him. He got arrested for dealing drugs because he took it out there on the boat. And he got shipped to the United States in a prison up here. And I worked hard to try to get him back to Columbia as fast as I can. But he was not a guy that woke up that morning and said, you know what, I'm going to move drugs. And not all of them are like that, but there are a lot of guys that are actually the mules that are moving things in that don't want to be doing it. And so for people to say certain things about, that person must be bad because they're in a cartel, they're in a bad circumstance. There's some that move to Texas, or they're told to go to Texas because we know where your mom and your sister live, and you're going to move to Dallas, and we're going to set you up, and you're going to receive these drugs for us. Most of them don't have a lot of education. Most of them have about a 5th grade education, and they don't have a lot of options. So the bad part of the cartel stuff drips all the way down to actual, quote, members, because I would say they're associated with the cartel because the cartels control certain areas and they control the flow of drugs. But a lot of these guys that get caught with it it's not their choice. And we don't understand that in the United States because thankfully we don't have a situation where that's happening. But that's changed my view on some of these cartel guys, that they didn't have a choice on doing that. That's kind of what it means to be a criminal defense lawyer, is to get in and see what's going on and to see what you can do under that circumstance about what's the right thing. And that's one of the best examples I know of what the perception and reality can be different.
Do they ever have to rat out the cartel, or is it just too dangerous?
It can. Like I said, their orders were, we know where your family is, and if you don't go out in the water, then they won't be there when you get back. So, you figure that out. So,
you have been mentored by some of the best lawyers in the country.
Yep.
In a couple words, what separates a good lawyer from a great one?
A good lawyer has to have trial skills. A good lawyer has to be a gunslinger, and to the extent that they're not afraid to step into a fray. A good lawyer has to have the personality to work a room and be fair in their dealings before having to use any of those qualities as far as in a fight. I believe a great lawyer attracts more by honey than vinegar, but you've also got to do enough that they know what you're doing. And I was trained by all the lawyers that I consider to be really good or were gentlemen and carried themselves in a way that you seem to know what you're doing, but you weren't arrogant, that you have the ability to talk people into doing what you want them to do and be able to express things to your client where that client's comfortable with you, to go along with those things. And these lawyers know their skill, and they also are always doing things with other lawyers that they know are comfortable with them, including other lawyers to do things that they know are good. And if I need to include somebody, I'm going to always include somebody I think's a lot smarter than me. And that's how I kind of view the way the other lawyers. And I think those qualities, as we talked about earlier, having the skill set and being able to communicate and being even keel. You can't lose your temper and things like that in order to get where you need to go for your client.
Well, I love that answer because I always think you're cool hand, Luke.
Thanks.
But also, with all the accolades and all the bragging rights you have, you are one of the most humble attorneys, especially a male lawyer that doesn't have the bravado ego that we all, that many get made fun of. You just don't carry it. But
well, I appreciate it. I don't think it would suit me, number one. But number two, the guys that I respect the most, none of them that way.
This is part 1. Would you like to come to part 2? And we want to hear next time the more war stories, trial stories, behind the scenes, details.
Today was overview. We can have some war stories of murder cases and what was going on behind the scenes and stuff that would be fun.
All right, great.